Good morning. My name is Kristin Wray, and I serve as a career development specialist in the East Central area of the state. Today's presentation is on building an inclusive apprenticeship program. And presenting alongside me today is my colleague, Davis. Davis, would you like to introduce yourself and explain the accessibility features of today's webinar?
Thanks, Chris. My name is Davis Raff, and I am the Career and Credential Consultant in the East Central and Northeast areas. At OOD, we plan for accessibility from the start. For example, we use the accessibility checker that is built into Microsoft 365 to review the resource guide in PowerPoint. We address color contrast, font size and style, and add alternative text known as alt text to visual images. Also, in our delivery, we mention each other by name as the conversation goes back and forth to indicate who is speaking. This can be helpful when attendees are receiving this information through services like American Sign Language interpretation and live captioning. After the webinar, we edit the transcript and fix any captioning errors before uploading the webinar to our on-demand library. We also include a reasonable accommodation statement in our invitation to the webinar, so if attendees need an accommodation, they know who to contact to ask. Taking these steps up front can make the presentation more accessible and inclusive for everyone.
Absolutely. Thanks, Davis. So today's webinar was created to help employers embrace inclusivity in apprenticeship programs, particularly for those who have individuals with disabilities in their programs. Throughout this session, we will shed light on how inclusive apprenticeship programs offer the opportunity for employers to reap many benefits, such as widening their talent pool and experience, and a more diverse and dynamic workplace for everyone. We will also cover some best practices and considerations when implementing an inclusive apprenticeship program, along with ideas for common, reasonable accommodations. We will also hear from our guest speaker, Travis Mariest, who serves as the business representative for the Central Midwest Regional Council of Carpenters. He will share his experiences with implementing inclusive apprenticeship programs. And then finally, we will share how OOD can be a resource to support inclusive apprenticeships. So Davis, can you start us off with an overview of apprenticeship programs and inclusive apprenticeship programs?
Yes, thank you, Chris. Let's first by sharing a brief description of an apprenticeship. According to Apprentice Ohio, which is the state's program that connects companies that offer apprenticeships to people wanting to learn a trade or skill. Apprenticeships are an inexpensive way for employers to build a highly skilled and motivated workforce. Apprenticeship programs have and will continue to play a vital role in the economy as they help employers fill in-demand careers. The programs combine related instruction in a specific occupation with paid on-the-job learning, which provides job seekers a pathway to learn skills and earn industry-recognized portable credentials upon completion. Apprenticeships can be sponsored by an individual employer or group of businesses. Also, other sponsors may be intermediaries such as industry associations, trade groups, unions, and community-based organizations or community college. According to Apprentice Ohio, 23,437 active registered apprentices are working in 584 programs in 214 different occupations. Some occupations with apprenticeships you may already be aware of are skilled trades such as electricians, carpenters, and plumbers. In addition to these traditional occupations, there are Ohioans currently working in apprenticeships in tailoring, tool and die making, welding, healthcare, and many more. There's an apprenticeship for a wide variety of interests and skills. The outlook of apprenticeship programs as the workforce training option is truly very bright. Chris, would you like to share what an inclusive apprenticeship is?
Absolutely. So now that we've talked about what an apprenticeship is, let's talk a little bit about what makes an apprenticeship inclusive. So an inclusive apprenticeship program is intentionally designed so apprentices with a disability have access to and are supported to complete the program. So according to Partnership on Inclusive Apprenticeship, a project funded by the U.S. Department of Labor, Office of Disability Employment, apprenticeship programs have many opportunities to promote inclusion. So let's go through a few examples of steps employers can take to build an inclusive program. So you can ensure accessibility by making sure the hiring process, training, and worksite is accessible to all job seekers. This includes providing accessible technologies, training materials, and video conferencing for remote learning. You can provide reasonable accommodations, and that can include job restructuring, modified work schedules, assistive technology, and accessible facilities. You can promote an inclusive workplace and foster a workplace culture where all employees can contribute meaningfully, including apprentices with disabilities. Use inclusive interview techniques. And so for this, for an example, an interviewer should follow basic disability etiquette principles, focus on the candidate's abilities, and please avoid asking questions about their disability. And finally, have inclusive policies that make apprenticeships more inclusive, such as diversity and inclusion requirements, tax incentives, and fast track hiring policies. Davis, how can inclusive programs benefit apprentices with disabilities?
Chris, some of these include skill development, steady income, avoiding student debt, and obtaining industry recognized credentials. These are valuable benefits to any apprentice, but inclusive apprenticeships go beyond the obvious benefits. Inclusive apprenticeships offer people with disabilities an opportunity to demonstrate their skills and value to an employer. The employer can see firsthand the positive contribution an employee with a disability can make to their company. And finally, it provides an apprentice who has a disability with structured training that includes mentorship from an experienced industry professional familiar with a diverse workplace. That's quite a list of benefits for an apprentice, but I'm wondering what benefits an inclusive apprenticeship might have for an employer. Maybe the audience can help us out. Here's a poll question for our attendees today. Question: inclusive apprenticeship programs are likely to benefit employers by A, improving skill levels and productivity of their employees, B, reducing turnover costs, C, building a broader talent pipeline, or D, all of the above. I'll give a few seconds here for all the answers to come in. Thank you all for answering. And it looks like everybody got it correct. The answer is D. It's not only the employee who benefits from an inclusive apprenticeship, but as we see from the poll question, there are many benefits to the employer as well. Chris, do you have any more examples of benefits to employers that you'd like to share?
Absolutely, Davis, and great job, audience, on 100% correct. So according to the Partnership on Inclusive Apprenticeship Project, employers who invest in hiring people with disabilities can experience financial advantages and growth. Inclusive apprenticeships help employers build a diverse workforce of trained, skilled workers, and they attract a wide array of talented employees who value diversity and inclusion. It can also have a positive impact on the business's corporate social responsibility. And then finally, employers who offer an inclusive apprenticeship program can experience an increase in the productivity and retention of their workers, and that enhances the long-term value of their companies. So, Davis, before we get into the details about creating an inclusive apprenticeship, I think it's important that we address some myths about people with disabilities in the workplace.
I would agree, Chris. as myths can create barriers to inclusion, limit employment opportunities for qualified individuals, and prevent a company from accessing a diverse talent pool. How about I read the myth and you bust it with the facts?
I'm ready. Let's do it, Davis.
Okay, here's our first myth. People with disabilities, including apprentices, aren't able to do meaningful work.
Okay, so the fact of this is, unfortunately, this is a common stereotype about people with disabilities that's simply not true. People with disabilities can be productive, talented workers who are quite capable of doing meaningful work. And here at OOD, we get to see this every single day in the work that we do. People with disabilities bring diverse backgrounds, education levels, and experiences to any work setting.
Thanks, Chris. Myth 2. Apprentices with disabilities will require more training or will work slower than other apprentices.
So, Davis, this is another stigma about people with disabilities, and it's that they require extra oversight or are unable to do the work on their own. As with any apprentice, once they receive proper training, an apprentice with a disability is just as capable of doing the job as their counterparts.
Okay, Chris, here's another myth. It's too expensive to provide an apprentice with a reasonable accommodation.
Okay, Davis, let me clarify first that not every person with a disability is going to need an accommodation. But if they do, accommodations are often easy to implement and aren't as expensive as employers may think. According to a survey of employers conducted by the Job Accommodation Network, also called JAN, employers experienced a median one-time cost of $300, with the majority of those accommodations costing nothing to implement.
Wow, Chris, that's great information. Our next myth is people with disabilities cannot work in a skilled trade profession.
Okay, so this is another misconception that is just not true. People with disabilities can work in a variety of industries and occupations, including the skilled trades. According to the Department of Labor, 1/4 of employed people with disabilities are working in skilled trades. In fact, the most common skilled trades are transportation, production, construction, and repair, installation, and maintenance.
Thanks, Chris. I'm so glad we took a moment to dispel some of the common misconceptions about people with disabilities in the workplace. So, we've covered what an inclusive apprenticeship is, the benefits to apprentices with disabilities and sponsors, and even busted some myths about workers with disabilities. Let's spend some time talking about the steps sponsors can take to implement an inclusive apprenticeship program and how OD can help. One of the first steps apprenticeship sponsors can take is to review OD's Inclusive Employer Toolkit. It includes the best practices for fostering an inclusive workspace, strategies for recruiting, hiring, and supporting individuals with disabilities, providing workplace accommodations for employees with disabilities, and making the workplace accessible for everyone. A link to this resource has been posted in the chat. Chris, can you talk about the recruitment, hiring, and onboarding steps?
Sure. So recruitment plays an important role in helping a sponsor to grow their pool of talent and ensure equal opportunity for all qualified candidates. A collaborative effort with OOD can help Ohio apprenticeship sponsors recruit and onboard qualified apprentices with disabilities. OOD serves individuals who have a variety of physical, intellectual, mental health, and sensory disabilities. And these candidates also have diverse backgrounds, education, and work experience. Davis, you, as one of our career and credential consultants, work with businesses to learn about their apprentice needs, identify and pre-screen potential candidates that match their skills and experience, and directly connect businesses with a variety of qualified apprenticeship candidates. Our inclusive apprenticeship descriptions, when you're writing these, Make sure that they are inclusive. It's important for employers to evaluate the essential functions of the role and to use language that is easy to read, clear, and concise. So this can ensure that job descriptions resonate with all candidates, including those with disabilities. Incorporating a statement about diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility not only fosters a welcoming environment, but it also attracts a diverse, talented a pool of talent, excuse me. Ensuring your application process is accessible is also crucial to make sure everyone, especially individuals with disabilities, have equal access to apply. If the application process is online, consider removing unintended barriers such as using keywords or algorithms to sort applicant information, as these tools could exclude qualified candidates. So consider offering a phone number or an email if an applicant should require an accommodation and or an alternative way to apply if they're encountering an issue. And this helps make an impact to ensure a more inclusive application process. So with interviewing, accessible interviewing, that can be whether by phone, in person, or video. There may be a need for flexibility and accommodations when interviewing applicants, including individuals with disabilities. So employer sponsors providing reasonable accommodations during interviews help support applicants with disability-related challenges so they can participate fully. This can be as simple as providing captioning for a person who is deaf or hard of hearing, or may involve meeting at a step-free location, which allows candidates with mobility issues easier navigation. These considerations and small adjustments can have a huge impact. So ensuring an onboarding process is welcoming and inclusive. This enhances the overall success of your apprenticeship program. Although certain barriers may exist for individuals with disabilities in training and progressing through apprenticeship programs, it's essential to provide a fair chance for them to meet the same qualifications and performance expectations as other apprentices. So at times, a reasonable accommodation may be needed to support an individual with a disability. As a disability disclosure can happen at any time, and it also initiates the interactive process to identify a solution. Being prepared throughout the hiring process is always going to be best practice. And this can be accomplished by educating your staff, mentors, and the hiring team on recognizing a disability disclosure and following a process to support individuals with disabilities. All that said, Davis, can you talk about how sponsors can ensure the related instruction components of the apprenticeship are also inclusive and accessible?
Sure, Chris. Sponsors can ensure the classroom or related instruction components of the apprenticeship are accessible for apprentices with disabilities, enabling their success in completing the program. Some aspects to consider include accessible training locations, universal design for learning, and reasonable accommodations. Let's talk about each of these in more detail. When on-site training is required, consider ways to ensure the location and physical environment are easily accessible. These include parking and drop-off areas, entrances and exits, accessible routes and paths, classrooms, and common areas such as restrooms or break rooms. Chris, I think it's a good time to pause here for our first question and answer session.
Agreed. Let's do that. So if you, the audience, have a question, please feel free to enter it in the chat or raise your virtual hand and we will call on you. Also, we are very interested in hearing from the audience about the workplaces, so please drop in the chat and let us know if there are any registered apprenticeship sponsors out there in the audience. We would love to hear about your experiences and how you were creating an inclusive workplace, or if you're in the process of that. And while we are waiting for those questions to come in, I'd like to welcome Ron Klinowski back for our question and answer portion of the webinar. And So we'll kind of see if there's any questions coming in from the chat. Ron, let me know if you see anything.
Right now, we don't see any. I'm sure they're going to come though, right, Chris?
Yes, I'm sure they're just gearing up. We've been dropping a lot of information on you, so we'll give you guys a second. While we're waiting, though, we did receive a couple of pre-submitted questions from our audience. Thank you very much for those. So while we're letting the gears turn, let's just take a look at some of those pre-submitted questions from the audience before the webinar. So one question was whether apprenticeship programs will have accessibility for those in wheelchairs. And so the answer to this is people with all types of disabilities can successfully participate in a variety of apprenticeship programs. And there are many resources, shameless plug, including OOD. And we're here to help you support an apprenticeship, any apprenticeship sponsors in your efforts to ensure accessibility and inclusivity for individuals in your programs with disabilities. I did hear a ding. I don't know if that was a chat or not. If not, I have another question I can go through.
No, we still haven't had any yet.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you for that question. Whoever did pre-submit, thank you very much.
We do have one now, Chris, that just popped up. The person is asking, do you get paid for an apprenticeship? And I think that's probably going to vary depending on who's offering it. I don't know, Chris Davis, if that's been your experience.
Most apprenticeships are paid. The classroom instruction typically is not.
Yeah. Awesome. Great question. All right, so let's take a look at the second pre-submitted. We still have a couple minutes for Q&A. So the next question that we received is what is needed for the apprenticeship training cost and what type of certifications or credentials are available? Now, the answer to this is each of those answers, I'm sorry, is on a case-by-case basis, depending on the type of apprenticeship that you are hosting, the type of training components that are included in that apprenticeship program, and of course, the industry itself. So again, those may not be the exact answers, but shameless plug, OOD is here to help. My friend Davis Raff can always help walk you through some of these steps as well. But again, it really is going to be a case-by-case basis when looking at building those things out. So we have time for one more. I'll read the last pre-submitted in case we have one more coming from our live audience as well. So our last pre-submitted question was asking just basically how does a person find an apprenticeship? So individuals interested in learning more about our services and helping locate apprenticeships, build your own apprenticeships, and including exploring apprenticeships as a pathway to employment. You can visit our website at www.ood.ohio.gov, or you can go to www.oodworks.com, and that is the link to sign up for our services. But those links to the agency and to OOD Works are going to be entered into the chat. Please click on those if you need further assistance in building your apprenticeship program. If you're a person who is looking for an apprenticeship program that is inclusive, please utilize those resources and links that we're putting in the chat. So Ron, before we get back to things, I'll check with you again. Anything in the Q&A or anything that we're missing that we maybe need to call out?
Well, apparently you guys are doing a great job because people are getting the answers. We don't have any questions.
Awesome. Well, we'll try to continue that path. All right. So thank you for the questions that we did receive from the audience. Thank you so much for your participation thus far and with our polls as well. So we're going to continue now on with the presentation and talk a little bit more about building these inclusive apprenticeship programs. But we will have another Q&A session before we wrap up. And that'll be coming a little later on in the webinar. So now I'd like to share how sponsors can incorporate something that is very near to my heart, universal design for learning, into your apprenticeship program. So let's talk a little bit about universal design. As everyone has different learning styles for learning information, sponsors who incorporate universal design for learning approach can enable individuals with disabilities and those with diverse learning styles to access the curriculum in a more effective way. So there are 7 principles to universal design. Incorporating these principles into your curriculum for apprentices can improve accessibility and successful completion of the program. So we're going to look at each one of these in and of themselves, and we'll talk a little bit about each design. So the first principle is equitable use. Now, this means the curriculum is usable by all. An example of this would be to use a variety of teaching methods, such as lectures, project-based assessments or assignments, and these things are to accommodate diverse learning styles. The next principle is flexibility in use, and this principle reminds us to keep the unique characteristics of an individual in mind. So, for example, adjustable workstations provide individuals the option to customize their work environment to their needs. The third principle is simple and intuitive use, and this considers the various ways individuals process information. Creating an object or space that is simple and intuitive means individuals can understand the necessary information needed to use it. So, like providing pictorial images and audio descriptions along with written text in learning material. The fourth example is perceptible information. So this means the necessary information being communicated to an individual can be received regardless of sensory abilities. An example of this would be to consider how assistive technologies such as closed captioning or speech to text can be used in addition to the verbal instruction. The fifth principle of universal design is tolerance for error. This considers a user's safety when using a product or moving within an environment. An example of this principle is ensuring that a hallway is free from all obstructions to accommodate individuals navigating that space. The sixth principle is low physical effort, and this focuses on the user's comfort, their strength, and endurance when utilizing a product or interacting with an environment. An example of this would be to minimize repetitive actions in the task to be performed. Now, the seventh and final principle of universal design is size and space for approach and use. Considerations should be taken when designing a space to ensure individuals can navigate and use all aspects of the environment, regardless of their body structure or mobility. An example here would be to accommodate variations in hand and grip size for tools and equipment. So, Davis, I know that was a lot, but can you share a little information about reasonable accommodations?
Absolutely, Chris. First, a reasonable accommodation is a change in the workplace that enables an apprentice with a disability access to work-related activities. Some examples of common accommodations for the related instruction components may include magnification software, dictation software, screen reading software. Also, it could be workstation modification, such as adjustable height workstations, ergonomic chairs, alternative keyboards, and mice. Alternative testing could be offered with extended time or alternative formats. Alternative material could be provided, such as Braille, large print, audio, or digital. Schedules could be modified to include breaks or arrival or departure times. And additional services such as scribes, sign language interpreting, and tutoring. Employers also report the benefits from making workplace accommodations far outweigh their associated costs. Some of the benefits identified in the study include retaining valuable employees, improving productivity and morale, reducing workers' compensation and training costs, and improving company diversity. Chris, how can these same elements apply to on-the-job training components of the apprenticeship?
Great question, Davis. So, when an apprentice transitions to the on-the-job training portion of the program, this is to apply learned knowledge and gain the hands-on experience. It's important to maintain those universal design principles and reasonable accommodation elements we were just talking about. In addition, there may be specific job-related accommodations needed in the work setting. So here are a few examples. Adjusting the lighting in a workspace for a person with low vision, you providing ergonomic tools for a person who has arthritis in their hands, or maybe permitting a flexible break schedule for an apprentice who has maybe diabetes and needs to eat or take medicine as necessary. Davis, can you share steps sponsors can take to help create a culture of inclusion in the workplace?
Chris, there are many ways to foster a culture of inclusion which can help apprentices with disabilities to bring their whole self to work and ask for what they're needed. Here are some ways to impact the culture. You could post your reasonable accommodation statement in key areas. This informs apprentices who may need an accommodation how to request one and whom to contact. This could send the message of an inclusive workplace. You could provide training, first of all, on disability etiquette to help them have respectful interactions with apprentices with disabilities, and then train supervisors and managers on how to recognize a request for a reasonable accommodation and the steps to take next. You could start or expand an employee resource group. The efforts of these groups often help identify barriers in the environment, offer effective solutions, and educate staff on disability-related topics. You could recognize and celebrate disability inclusion. Recognizing and celebrating disability inclusion in the workplace is a major aspect of fostering diversity and inclusion. By valuing the contributions and unique insights of employees with disabilities, organizations can have a culture of inclusivity. One way to do this is to recognize National Disability Employment Awareness Month during the month of October. At this time, we are excited to welcome Travis Mariest, who serves as a business representative for the Central Midwest Regional Council of Carpenters. Travis has more than 27 years of dedicated service to the United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners. He started as an apprentice and advanced to roles including foreman, field superintendent, and ultimately superintendent for the entire Northeast Ohio millwright division of a local contractor. In his current role, Travis recruits new members, provides support to certain members and employers, and secures valuable work opportunities for contractors. Welcome, Travis.
Davis, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So, Travis, I have a couple of questions for you. How did your organization begin its disability inclusion journey?
Davis, our disability inclusion journey began before I even really knew it began. I've spent my entire career working with somebody with some sort of disability, whether it be somebody that was an amputee, somebody with a learning disability, somebody with a professionally diagnosed disorder, hearing impaired. And I found out that we were being inclusive through a personal friend of mine uh, that has spent her career working for an organization that provides services for people with disabilities in the Richland Crawford County areas. She told me that I needed to get in touch with someone with OOD. She then sent me a contact for Ron Olnowski. So I talked with Ron, and scheduled a meeting. We discussed what we do as an organization, all the different crafts we cover. And Ron discussed with me, or all the different services they provide and people they provide them for.
Wow, thank you. What strategies would you find helpful in making apprenticeships more inclusive?
Oh, strategies. Well, so things that I see within our organization is our training instructors are constantly given further education, instruction on how to teach people different ways, because not everybody learns the same way. We have mentorship programs, within our organization, where we discuss different ways, how to include everybody within our apprenticeship and within our organization. We work with our, we have, tutoring sessions within our apprenticeship program, or even out, you don't necessarily have to be an apprentice. Any of our members can go through a tutoring session, at our training centers.
So the tutoring session really seems to help out.
The tutoring, the mentoring, we also have different committees that we get together and try to find ways to better improve our diversity and inclusion, and because it's very important for our organization to expand and include everybody. It's very important. It's always been important to us, but I think it's become more apparent here within the last several years, because of the amount of work that's available out there right now.
So it sounds to me like it really starts from the beginning when somebody is interested in becoming an apprentice.
Right.
As you took steps to become more inclusive, what resources or collaborations did you find valuable?
Resources, first thing would be our partnership with OOD. The first, once I got introduced to Ron, anytime I get a chance to be included on one of these sessions you have now, I'm learning how we're being inclusive, and I'm learning so many different ways that we can become more inclusive, to get better. We also partner with different vocational rehab centers. We go there. Those rehab centers are always looking for a place for the people they're serving to find them a career in something, and it's helped grow our membership, and it's helped put people in a good give them a good career, and within the Carpenters Union.
Excellent. So you're finding valuable workforce through these different avenues.
Yeah.
What are some of the benefits the Central Midwest Regional Council of Carpenters has experienced from being an inclusive apprenticeship program sponsor?
So what we're seeing is we're creating opportunities for people to have a successful career, which in turn provides us with the ability to provide our contractors with the skilled labor to complete their projects. The contractors are able to complete the projects, on time, under budget, which in turns gives them the opportunity to bid more jobs, which in turns, pushes us to provide more manpower, or more skilled workforce. Ultimately, it creates a more diverse workforce, and that in turns creates more membership, and it ultimately changes the culture of our industry. That's what I'm seeing.
So it's like a snowball once you get going.
Yeah, it can only do good things for the change in the culture is very important to us, ultimately.
Um, I think our attendees would be interested in knowing more about the example of reasonable accommodations you've implemented. You spoke about tutoring earlier.
Yeah.
Would you share with us some more about that?
So the different ways our instructors are taught. Somebody that has a hard time learning, doesn't do well in a classroom setting, we put them out in our workshops where they break it down. You know, these are our apprentices. You know, I'm myself included have a hard time learning reading from a book. Um, so you put it in front of me, and I start working with my hands. We put it together. The instructors then in turn show us how that all correlates with our math skills and stuff like that, which the it doesn't really cost anything. It's just the culture we're creating. I mean, that's the biggest thing I can say is we got some of the best instructors that out there as far as I'm concerned. I'm biased, of course. Um, they If somebody wants to do this work, somebody wants to get into construction, they have a passion for it, our instructors will find a way to get them the skills they need to be successful in this career.
It sounds to me like some of those accommodations are now you're implementing them for everybody because it's helping anybody that's coming through your apprenticeship program.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
So we're interested in learning about some a success story. Um, could you please describe an individual that has completed the apprenticeship program and what advice that you would give to somebody and how and also how he advanced in his career?
Okay. Yeah. When I was approached with being part of this, I kind of, uh, I had somebody in mind I heard a lot about, and I got to interview him. I knew him through our office. He works in different fields than I cover. So the gentleman's name's Derek. He started with us over 7 years ago. Went through his apprenticeship. Previous to that, Derek was a Marine. When he finished his term, he went to a factory where he lost a third of his arm. Unfortunately, he returned back to that company, and they didn't have what he wanted to do, you know, within that company. Um, Derek was introduced, informed about the Carpenters Union. Um, he came up to one of our training centers, applied. He got direct entry through one of the programs that are out there. Um, for veterans, they get direct entry into our program. So that in turn, led us to, we had to find him a job, got him involved. Derek was very um, determined to get through this apprenticeship, and he wanted to be the best he could. He didn't want any, he didn't, he wanted to learn every aspect of this craft. He spent his apprenticeship working in several fields. He worked in interior systems, metal studs, drywall, installing acoustical ceilings, building concrete forms for bridges, and building scaffold. Um, Through his apprenticeship, he would go to class, learn the different skills. The instructors would work with them. I talked with our instructors about this, and the, the guy's attitude was, he did as good as um, the rest of the apprentices by the end of the week once he worked with our instructors. Um, and so he built up his skills. He's now, what he really likes is moving fast, doing a lot of hands-on stuff. He's now a foreman, a lead foreman for a region for a large scaffold company. And if you don't know scaffolding, you got to climb, several hundred feet at times. You're building these structures for people to work off safely. Um, he's just a remarkable person. Meanwhile, the whole time he's missed a third of his arm, and he doesn't let that hold him back. He has aspirations of eventually becoming an instructor at our training center. You know, he wants to move through his career. He's good now. He's got a beautiful family. He's got 3 kids and a wife, and has a nice house. You know, he's just he inspires me to try to do better.
Wow, that's an awesome story. He got a chance and he's really taking advantage of it.
Right. And that's one of the things he said to me when I talked with him. He says, where other people, you know, the last company he came from wouldn't give him a chance, we gave him a chance. And that he says it meant a lot to him. And he says what we did with our apprenticeship program, what it did for him is it showed him that he will always have a job somewhere, because we're partnered with so many different contractors out there, and there's so many different aspects of our company.
Yeah, and looking at him as an individual instead of his disability, and seeing what he's capable of, where he can kind of guide you guys in the correct direction.
Absolutely.
What would your advice be for a sponsor who is concerned about including individuals with disabilities in their apprenticeship program be?
First thing is give everybody a chance. Give them a chance. If somebody shows an interest in something, give them a chance. Look at different ways you can include people with different challenges. Get involved with your local vocational rehab centers programs. They're always looking for, you know, employers to give their individuals a place to go and be successful, be independent. You know, those people like OD, you're doing the initial work of getting to know these people and working with them and providing them, you know, you find that person that's wants to get involved in this. I mean, you're helping everybody out, you know, essentially.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Travis, for providing such great information to us. I think you'll be available at the end for some questions. I saw one come in, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
So before we move on, I don't know if we want to maybe cover that question with Travis, asking for examples of types of work assignments done by apprentices while we have you on the line.
Sure. What's the question?
So the question was, can you give an example of types of work assignments done by apprentices?
Oh, types of work assignments done by apprentices. Oh, shoot. I mean, they go in when they first start out. They're given the basic tasks of, you know, you got to get this pile to that pile. You know what I mean? Move this stack of wood over to here. You need to, you know, a lot of it's safety oriented. You're getting them exposed to the safety aspect, you know, where you're at a position where you got to watch what's going on, and you're watching the journey person there do, you know, watch the journey person perform the work, and you're seeing them do it in a safe manner. But ultimately, as you go through, if you show that you're competent in doing certain activities, I mean, they put our apprentices right in there. I mean, there's so many different things that our apprentices do. But they do pretty much everything a journeyman does, but they have a journeyman right there next to them showing them how to do it.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much, Travis, for answering that question, and thank you for giving us so much insight. I heard a lot of universal design principles kind of being shared as you were talking about what you've done with apprentices and with your programs. And so again, we're just so happy that you were here to share some of that. And again, to your point, apprentices with disabilities can do the very same things that the other apprentices can do, just maybe with a reasonable accommodation. So thank you for making that known as well. So we're going to kind of switch gears here. And before we wrap up today's training, I want to talk a little bit about the U.S. Department of Labor's aspirational goal for registered apprenticeship programs. And this goal is to include qualified people with disabilities. So we're going to have another poll question for our audience. And so you should see on your screen a question, and the question reads, what is the aspirational goal for disability inclusion in apprenticeship programs set by the Department of Labor? Please choose one of the following answers. A, 5%, B, 7%, C, 10%, or D, 14%. So we'll give you folks a few seconds to submit your answers to that. See, the responses are coming in. All right. So it looks like looks like some of you are changing your mind. That's okay. You're allowed to do that. All right, so we're going to give the spoiler alert. The correct answer is B. The U.S. Department of Labor's 2016 Equal Employment Opportunity Rule established an aspirational goal of 7% for the employment of qualified individuals with disabilities as apprentices for each major occupation group within which the sponsor has an apprenticeship program. Now, remember, this is just a goal. It is not a quota or a mandatory level. However, sponsors are expected to make a good faith effort to reach this goal as they establish, manage, and grow their apprenticeship programs. This goal is also consistent with the Section 508 goal that applies to federal contractors and subcontractors. To help apprenticeship sponsors gain a better understanding of where they stand in terms of disability inclusion, the Department of Labor has a process for sponsors to assess the current participation of people with disabilities in their apprenticeship workforce. Measuring participation allows the sponsor to gauge how it is doing in outreach, enrollment, and providing equal opportunity in apprenticeships to qualified individuals with disabilities. So it can also show the employer where they have room for growth and their disability inclusion goals. So the first step in the process is to invite the apprentices to self-identify as an individual with a disability at the time of application, then again when an apprenticeship is offered, when apprenticeship offer has been made, and then again annually thereafter. Now, self-identification is different from disability disclosure. Self-identification means to voluntarily and confidentially provide information about your disability status. And it is specifically used for data collection and reporting only. Now, generally, more information about this process can be found on the U.S. Department of Labor's Guide on Self-Disability Identification, and I believe one of my colleagues has put a link to that guide in the chat. So please take a look at that. The next step is for the sponsor to do a workforce analysis. Now, this requirement can help a sponsor identify barriers, keeping them from achieving the 7% aspirational goal, and develop outreach and recruitment strategies to increase the number of apprentices with disabilities in their programs. Sponsors are required to conduct a disability workforce analysis within 2 years of the date of the registration of the program, and then at each subsequent compliance review. More information on the Department of Labor's guidance on measuring the disability aspirational goal can be found on their website, so please take a look. And a link has also been provided. Well, a link to that will be provided in the resource guide that accompanies this webinar. So we will be sharing those resources with you as well. Okay, so Davis, now that we have a better understanding of the benefits of an inclusive apprenticeship, the aspirational goals set for the programs, and how to measure them, would you care to share how OOD can help sponsors achieve their inclusion goals?
Of course. When it comes to building inclusive apprenticeship programs, it is important to emphasize the significance of the resources and partnerships available for sponsors. As we mentioned previously, OD can be a resource for helping sponsors hire people with disabilities. In my role as a career and credential consultant, my colleagues and I across the state can identify qualified candidates with disabilities based on the requirements of your registered apprenticeship program. Apprentices who are eligible for OOD's vocational rehabilitation services can receive individualized supports like job coaching, tutoring, or assistive technology to help successfully complete the registered apprenticeship program. OD can also provide a variety of disability awareness educational training. Those are sessions that will help support your organization's efforts to foster a culture of diversity and inclusion. Training the hiring professionals, supervisors, and coworkers on disability etiquette and awareness can help all staff learn ways to interact respectfully with people with disabilities. It can also help demystify stereotypes, myths, and fears about disabilities and help remove any unintentional biases that could have a negative impact on an apprentice with a disability. Another resource for employers is OD's Accessible Ohio Specialists. They can identify possible resources, accommodations, and accessibility solutions for application process, work sites, classrooms, and training materials. This service is provided at no cost for employers to create productive worksite and classroom environments.
So I see that we are coming up on the hour and we're nearing the end of the webinar, but we do want to give a quick pause for any questions that may have come into the chat. So Ron is joining us again. Ron, any comments or questions from our audience?
We do not have any at this time.
All right. Thanks, Ron. So we're nearing the end of the webinar. So really quickly, folks, before you go, let's get a quick summary in. Today we defined what an apprenticeship is and what is meant by an inclusive apprenticeship. We discussed best practices and actionable steps to ensure that an organization's apprenticeships are inclusive and accessible to individuals with disabilities. We talked about the U.S. Department of Labor's requirement for apprenticeship sponsors, and that those requirements that can promote inclusion of qualified individuals with disabilities. We want to give many, many thanks to Travis Mariest for joining us and talking about some of the strategies at Central Midwest Regional Council of Carpenters and some of the things that you've implemented. Thank you so much for your time today. And of course, to our audience, we want to thank you all for joining us today.